Good evening. I'm Jay Hess, and my theme or my topic is there nowhere else to go, or where else can a Jehovah's Witness go? Where can I go if I'm a Jehovah's Witness? Even if I'm currently active, where can I go? This question is something that the Watchtower has capitalized on. This is from 1974 Watchtower, July 15th, page 438. So this is typical. So here I'm going to read the whole paragraph. Paragraph 21. Perhaps something is said in one of the Watchtower publications that you do not grasp, or that adjust our previous understanding of matters. How do you view this? Will you allow doubts to creep in? Will confidence be replaced with skepticism? Ask yourself, where did I gain the knowledge of the scriptures that I already have? Has not the spiritual food provided through the Watchtower publications helped me to change my life and find contentment and satisfaction? Where else would I go? This is the feeling toward Jehovah's arrangements that the disciples had toward Jesus. Quote, Lord, whom shall we go away to? You have sayings of everlasting life. John 6:68. You see what they're doing? They're capitalizing on a text, and as Jehovah's Witnesses, our brains were reprogrammed to think, where will we go? Because that was the question just before this. Where else would we go? So you're conditioned to think of a where, not to a whom, which is what this is about, which is what the disciples asked. Who will we go to? So the answer to that question, of course, starts out to be it's not a where, it's a who, and that who is Jesus. The difficulty is that with a witness thinking of getting out, or even supposing that they might leave, or someone who is starting to leave, or whatever, there is still the real question, where? And you understand why there is a where is because we are humans, we like relationships, we like friends, and friends are based on commonality. Well, what if I'm leaving the Watchtower and I have, how many core doctrines does the Watchtower have? Zillions. I mean, there's got a lot of doctrines, maybe not core doctrines. But I remember a question from readers is, how many doctrines does a Jehovah's Witness have to believe? And the answer was, all distinctive doctrines are required. That was a question from readers. I don't remember the year. So, as a witness, we have all these distinctive doctrines that are like threads holding us. And you could snip one or two, but there's zillions of them. So you cut some and you're still held in, because why? Watchtower is very different from every other religion. Why? We are rehearsing throughout the year at the school, theocratic school, of how to defend these doctrines. Other churches don't do that. And we're taking it to the door, and we're studying with people, and we're rehearsing them at the Watchtower study, and we're rehearsing them at the book study. So we are ingraining, pre-programming ourselves with all these doctrines, and we're convinced of them, or think we are. So if you snip a few, we're still held in. And if I ever think of leaving, then that Watchtower comes to my mind. So we think of leaving, wait, where am I going to go? Because I want friends based on common beliefs. That means if I leave, and I have these beliefs that are common to the Watchtower, but they won't have me, or I got problems with them. Wherever I go, I have to keep all these doctrines secret, all my beliefs secret. Well, that's what I was doing when I was in the Watchtower. What's the difference? In or out, I'm having to keep all these things secret, and this is very unpleasant. So what do? Now, if I think I'm the only one that has figured this all out, what do you think of a person who says, I'm the only one on the planet and I've got it all figured out? What do you think about that person? Nuts. Okay, so I know that, so therefore I'm nuts. Oh dear, maybe there's other people, but where are they? If there is a true religion, or a somewhat true religion, or a decent religion, and there is a God, and if there is a God, I should be able to find them. Where are they? And Matthew 24:14, this good news of the kingdom will be preached in all the inhabited earth, where a witness to all the nations, then the end will come. Right? That was the first verse I ever learned. Who is that's preaching the good news of the kingdom? I don't mean the bad news of hell, I mean the good news of the kingdom. It's good news. You know what? As a witness, I love blue sky, blue water, blue dolphins, and green grass. Who is preaching this? So I've got all those questions in my head. So where am I going to go? That's a very real and serious question. You see how serious that is? Because that can stop a witness even if their mind is just going to a point, I'm about to ask, but where would I go? The mind goes, no, 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 no. Because I understand there's consequences, not just losing my friends and my family and everything else, but I would have to live a life of secrecy wherever I go. If I believe in God, then wherever I go, I've got all these things going on in my head. Okay, tonight I'm going to answer the question. Now, for some that have never been witnesses, I don't know how much you're going to think of my answer, but I'm going to have an answer about where can you go. Not just yes to Jesus, of course. That's the who, but where. I'm talking about where and what do you do about these issues. So that's going to be answered tonight. If that's not of interest to you directly because you're not a witness, not an ex-witness or anything else, I'm going to propose a ministry where you can use a ministry to help these witnesses. And here's the cool part of it. It's very friendly. There's no confrontation at all with the witness. You're not going to like this next one. There are no Bible verses in it. Normally when I present something, I do 30 verses minimum, right? When I do a presentation to y'all, but there are no verses at all. And it's very, very friendly. This would work with someone who's committed to being a witness. This would work with a relative that says, no, I'm not going to do anything confrontational. So this is a very gentle method. I've had gentle methods before where you ask questions, you engage the witness, but it didn't work well in family, relatives. It didn't work with people that are committed witnesses because they don't want to engage you, or if you've got a history with them, then it didn't work. So I have this proposal tonight. Some that would hear this and they go, oh no, this is way too gentle. And I'm asking that instead of thinking about yourself, think about we're helping a witness. Okay, we're helping a JW. Not necessarily going to get them out overnight. That's not where our goal is. We're going to help them do unto others as you'd have others do to you. So in order for this to work, I need to tell you my own history for those who don't know it, but maybe know bits and pieces. So I'm going to go through that because it's also my journey and what helped me to get out a better transition to something else and where to go. I was raised a JW, Jehovah's Witness. I'll say JW. Don't mean to be disrespectful or mean to anybody, but JWs is the term. I was baptized at age 15. I was a serious JW. I believed it. I enjoyed going, believe it or not, I enjoyed talking to people. I didn't like walking and knocking on doors, but I did like talking to people. And I became serious about my ministry. And it ended up that I began an expertise in a focused area of debating and refuting the Trinity. When someone in the congregation got a hold of a pastor that wanted to debate the Trinity, I would get called in. And I had debates with folks. I even debated a fellow who was going for his PhD in New Testament Greek. I never lost a debate, by the way. I should have lost them all, but I didn't lose them. And I had answers to every argument that I had ever come across and read, and I was reading anti-Watchtower material, read Walter Martin, read all this, trying to find answers to all these questions. And there was one I struggled with. Those who know my history know where this is going. I struggled with the Hebrews 1:6, which was worshiping Jesus. We heard that earlier quoted today. And did some research. And did you know that back in 1945, it was the October 1945 Watchtower that said that you should worship Jesus and use two scriptures, Hebrews 1:6 and John 5:23. Now this is what the Watchtower used to support the idea of worshiping Jesus. And it was in their 1945 charter that you should worship Jesus. How do you know? I had a job assignment at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the state, and I heard it was in the Recorder of Deeds office. I walked in, went up the second floor, pulled off the volume, found the Watchtower's charter, went over and photocopied it. No one gave it to me. I found it myself. And in there it says that the purpose of the Watchtower Society, amongst 1,000 other things, was to worship Jehovah God and Jesus Christ. Okay, so here, now that research came later in my life, but while I was a Jehovah's Witness, I was researching all this about the topic of worship, and I need to give you a little history, if you don't already know it, is that from the inception of the Watchtower, they did believe in worshiping Jesus. Light Volume 2 is my favorite go-to book by Rutherford. In there, he explains that it is wrong to worship men, it is improper to worship angels, but you should worship Jesus. Now, just telling you, just read through it. Light Volume 2. And so it's clearly that they believed it. They held to worshiping Jesus up. 1950, there was some pivotal things going on with them where they, what is the difference between honoring men and worshiping? So they wrestled with that. And then 1954 is when they stopped promoting the worship of Jesus. But they didn't say it was a sin. 1954 is the last time the make sure of all things, hold fast to what is fine. That was the last year that publication said that it was okay to give worship to Jesus. After that, you never mentioned it. Didn't say you couldn't, just didn't say you could. Even through the 70s, 1970, they have an article on Revelation 19:10 that said that you could worship Jesus in a sense. There was another Watchtower where they had two different answers on the same Watchtower page. That was funny. It was a mystery. I had a friend who was a circuit overseer. We privately would go out and drive around, go to breakfast. And he says, Jay, could you explain? This is the circuit overseer. He's now at Bethel, by the way. Nice guy. If he's listening to this, I miss you, Sam. He said, Jay, can you explain this? Because can you imagine who I get to ask these questions? I can't ask, the only one I can ask is my wife, because I can't ask the elders to explain Scripture to me. And he says, who do I ask? He says, so I'm asking you, what is your input and thought on this? So I explained my position on worshiping Jesus, that it was okay, and it was still consistent with Scripture, da-da-da-da-da. And that's continued. And I felt really good about refuting the Trinity, and so I started writing this down in written form, little newsletters, sending them out to friends, that circuit overseer, and a friend from Bethel, and some people liked it, some people didn't, and it got forwarded to the society. Some people there didn't like it. So in the late 1980s, I happened to be on a business trip, so I decided to go to Brooklyn and go to 25 Columbia Heights and talk to a member of the service desk, if you know what the service desk is about. Nice guy. Bill, if you're listening to this, miss you. He met me and he said, Jay, what you're doing makes the society nervous. We've gotten copies of everything you've ever written, a lot of stuff. We can't find anything wrong. We all agree with it, but you're not supposed to be doing this, and it makes us nervous. Okay? Later on that year, a friend of mine who was a contributing writer to the society, we both worked for IBM. He had been asked to write things for the Wake magazine. He contacted me and he says, you need to call the research department. They're not going to call you, you need to call them. So I called him up, and I'd already had contact with the head of the research department. And he said, we would like to invite you to write a series of Watchtower study articles, not the ordinary Watchtower articles, but the study articles, all about refuting the Trinity. And this was late 1980s. Okay? And I said, sure. And so I wrote one article, submitted it, wrote a second article. When I was about to write the second article, I'm thinking, the society has not really grappled with the worship of Jesus. And I had another friend who was a contributor to the society, and he and I agreed that Jesus should be worshiped, and he'd said so in print in his own documentation. So we said, I just thought, I'm going to write an article, submit it to the writing department, and see what happens. That was late 1980s. What I didn't know was that the society was in a transition mode. They were going to go full-blown, it is now a sin to worship Jesus. So here I've been telling people that Jesus is to be worshipped, Jehovah's Witnesses, that Jesus is to be worshipped. I submitted an article, and the next thing I hear from my friend said, you need to duck. They're coming for you. And I was, so in 1990, I was put on trial. on worshiping Jesus, because in early 1990 they came out in an announcement for the theocratic school. Remember all these titles? They had one of the titles, Jesus is not one to be worshipped. That's the title. So all of a sudden here I've been telling people, now Watchtower publishes a line that says Jesus is not to be worshipped, so now I'm in trouble. So then follow that, I got an invitation to meet with the judicial body. The governing body had appointed a set of 3 elders. They weren't even in my same circuit. You know what they're normally, the elders are in your own congregation, right? Or in your circuit. Well, these guys weren't even in the same circuit because I'd been associated with the writing department. So they got these special hotshot elders, brought on charges, and I admitted, I confessed, but I didn't recant, and I didn't repent. So you know what happens right now. So I was disfellowshipped, but I appealed. I wrote an appeal letter to the governing body saying, well, normally, aren't you disfellowshipped for things you have been told are wrong and you're not supposed to do? There's no Watchtower article on that ever that says it's wrong to worship Jesus. So it didn't matter, but they said, they still set up they did have a second judicial committee that went real fast. They said, didn't they tell you already, Brother Hess, that you are a wicked man? I said, yes. And he says, okay, you're done. And so it went really fast. So that would finalize it. There's no other appeals. You can only appeal twice. I mean, you can only appeal the second time into the governing body. So I was out. And so it gives you a little context, because I had never really thought seriously about the question, where else can you go? Because I'm center. I'm with the writing department. This is all cool. I love this. I didn't agree with everything, but I agreed with the core doctrines. And all of a sudden, I'm out on the street. And now I have to seriously think, where else can I go? If I hold to core doctrines, where else? I was supposed to keep things secret as a witness. Don't tell people that you're with the writing department. Don't tell people that you worship Jesus. That's finally the message. And now, what am I going to do? Because I've already convinced myself, and I've studied the scriptures, and I'm convinced of certain things. So, that's the intro. So I'm going to pick 4 of the top doctrines that held me into the Watchtower, and I think they're the core doctrines that any witness is coming out who believes this stuff is going to hold to. And then I'm going to tell you where you can go. To who, it's obvious, it's to Jesus. But there's a where involved there, and we're going to talk about that. And I'd just like you to be patient and hear what's going on, and I'm going to do some name dropping of scholars. Hopefully many of you will know some of them. I think most of you will know some of these names that's involved in answering that question of where can you go. And what I'd ask you to think about, do you know the little saying, on the essentials, unity. On the non-essentials, liberty, yes. And on all things, charity, love. All right. I'm hoping you'll believe that and agree with it. This was from a German Lutheran theologian in 1627. Here we go. Rupertus Maldinius. Not Augustine like somebody, but it's 1627. It's a great saying. He was a Lutheran. It was something that a lot of churches have heard, as you just proved to me. Thank you very much. I'm asking that as you listen to this, not to think about what you personally think is the answer, but are you willing to make a discernment between what's essential and what's not essential? Okay? Would you be willing to do that to help a Jehovah's Witness? Okay. As far as essential, if someone asked me, are the witnesses hold to some things that are that would exclude them from being considered a member of the body of Christ? Yeah, there are some things. Someone asked me earlier today, what's my top of my list? I would say the witnesses misunderstand resurrection. That's not a simple one. If someone would like to know more about the resurrection, let's talk. I'll throw out a Hebrew word, repha. If you think that you knew all the Greek words for spirit, and Hebrew words, ruach, nephesh, Greek is suki and pneuma, you're missing 2 words. Hebrew repha and Greek phantasma. If you don't know those words, you have not researched the subject of death and the resurrection. Okay, that was a quick one. So I'm going to ask that you consider where would you draw the line, not even for non-essentials, but even what would be essential for fellowship, not just even essential for salvation. What would you consider essential for fellowship? And I think through this, you can see this, and I hope you'll agree with me. So the 4 doctrines I'm going to talk about are 1, paradise, earth. JWs love that. Right? Blue sky, blue water, blue dolphins, and green grass. What do you think the second major issue that keeps JWs on the other side of the fence? The preaching work. Who's preaching, and I would say, the good news of the kingdom? Who's doing that? See, that ties to the first one, the paradise earth, and then who's preaching it. The second one, I'm going to choose the Trinity doctrine. We've heard a lot about that today. I'm going to talk about that or a piece of it. Third issue, issues with hell, right? Isn't that one that JWs, as ex-JWs, we really cared about? And number 4, I had to pick one because we're getting down the list. I picked politics and neutrality. There's others. How many are there? Zillions, but these other ones are easy for a JW to get over and for mainstream Christians to deal with in their fellowship. The other ones are kind of lower on the list. Now, the key part to this, for this method that I'm talking about, for it to work, okay, it did work, it worked on me, is that as a witness, I thought, we're the only ones who believe this. Okay? I also thought that the Watchtower kept me very well informed, because the Watchtower wants me engaged in the public, wants me to go door to door. They gave me the make sure, they give me the reasoning book. We're doing these things at the service meeting. The Watchtower keeps me informed about other religions and how to engage other religions. So I felt I'm informed. And if you wonder how the Watchtower keeps informed, well, it's obvious. They have congregations all over the place. When people get hard questions, who do they tell? The elders. Who do the elders tell? The circuit overseer. Word gets back to Bethel, and then what do? They invite people out in the field to write articles for the society. That's the circle. So that's how the Watchtower gets informed. I mean, how do these guys at Bethel know this stuff? Answer all these questions. They don't. Now, I didn't mention this, but when I got recruited for writing for the society, I called up and talked to the fellow there, and he says, now I got to give you these instructions. He says, I'm going to send you some special mailing labels that get you around the mail desk so that you get it right to the writing department. And he says, the Watchtower is getting reports from the field that they are disturbed by a particular book, this is back in the 1980s, by Robert Bowman. The book was Why You Should Believe in the Trinity. And one way or another, the witnesses, the friends, are being impacted by this book. So Jay, we want you to read the book, research it. Do you live near a seminary? I said, yes, I do. I live near Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. He says, go out there, check out their library, and build up and read up and write these Watchtower study articles. So if you thought that the witnesses at the headquarters don't know about Christendom, oh, they do. In fact, many of them have their own secret little library they want anybody else to know that is combined with Watchtower stuff. So my point is the Watchtower does know about these things, but you won't find about it in the Watchtower. In fact, the fellow said, don't mention these books specifically. You have to refer to it. And the word he uses is obliquely. Okay? In my research and in my travels as a witness, the first big shock I got is someone says, I don't remember who gave it to me, I got a magazine from something called Dallas Theological Seminary. Looked like a nice magazine. If I remember, it had a picture of a flower on it. This is back in the 1980s. And it said that they believe, or promoting the idea that Jesus will come back and live and establish his kingdom on a paradise earth. And I sat there staring at this magazine because, wait a minute, we're the only ones that believe that. And if there is this other group, well, there can't be, because the Watchtower keeps me informed. And they're not going to keep any secrets. So it must be that Dallas Theological Seminary is probably a home church, a little bitty home church somewhere, and this guy's got a printing press back in his garage. And then I realized, no, there is a Dallas Theological Seminary, and they did teach that that Jesus will come back and have a government and kingdom, and it'll be a paradise earth. And you know what that did to my brain? Now, I'm not arguing with a Christian over Scripture, am I? No one Christian is challenging me on some debatable thing, and I'm wrestling. What are they doing? They're giving me what I already believe. But there's two messages in here. The Watchtower hasn't told you. They're keeping a secret. Because if you knew this, you might what? Leave and find a place to go. And this is starting to answer the question, where else could I go? And I wasn't even asking the question, and all of a sudden, there seems to be a place I could go. Well, of course, that was until I didn't know that Dallas Theological Seminary wasn't bigger than a house church. That was my first big shock. Then as time goes on, of course, I was expelled. And then I continue doing research because I'm now thinking, where else am I going to go? And I'm reevaluating all my beliefs, and including the Trinity. And after having been an expert in refuting the Trinity, I do all this research, and I conclude two things. Jesus is a distinct person from the Father. Now, if you remember from the Trinity brochure, which has been out for a while, and now you can't even get it anymore, but this was the heyday when it was out, the focus of that magazine was on two things. Jesus is a distinct person. And I thought, well, that blows away the Trinity, doesn't it? And then, in fact, the center portion, I think pages 13 to 16, is focused on Jesus as a distinct person. So I said, we got you, you Trinitarians, because you don't know that Jesus is a distinct person. So now through my research, I'm absolutely convinced Jesus is a distinct person. So here I'm an ex-witness. Jesus is a distinct person. And I conclude that, like as a witness, he's eternally subordinate to the Father. So I said, where do I fit? I'm the only one on the planet that has this figured out. Wait a minute, that sounds like a crazy person. So what's going on? So I called up a name from a seminary. This was TEDS, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. What do you think that the professors there are Trinitarians? Right? Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. So I get this fellow on the phone, I call him up home, and I said, hey, Dr. Harris, here's what I believe. I believe Jesus is a distinct person and eternally, functionally subordinate to the Father. He said, where would I fit? I'm an ex-witness. He says, well, Jay, you're a Trinitarian. No, because what I had come to conclusion as a witness doesn't fit somewhere, because the Trinity brochure never mentions that there's people who believe that. And I'm talking to, not my neighbor, I'm talking to a professor at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School who's telling me I'd really fit in as a Trinitarian. What? Okay? So, that led me down a new shock. So that's part of my story, and I want you to understand my shocks as I now go through these 4 topics. I'm calling these 4 walls that keep JWs in, 4 walls. So they are the paradise earth, the Trinity doctrine, issues with the Trinity doctrine, which I kind of just touched on. And then thirdly, the third one I picked, hell, and lastly 4 is politics and neutrality. So, this issue on paradise earth, now you may have heard of large mainstream evangelical groups that believe that Jesus will come back and set up a kingdom in a paradise earth. I don't know, had you heard that before? I'm going to mention some names and see if you know these guys. This is the importance of premillennialism, because there's this view of Jesus coming back on earth and then ruling. That's called premillennialism. There's 2 kinds. There's premill pre-trib. I'm shortening it because that's hard to say. And premill post-trib, otherwise premill historical view. Back then there weren't a lot of them. Now there's more. This fella holds to the premill view, and he's mentioning in this article, he mentions that there's going to be a paradise earth, and God will not give up. He's going to have a paradise earth. There'll be no more death. And the guy, an obscure scholar, you may know him, normangeisler.com. Anybody here know Norman Geisler? All right. Okay. So I mention that because if you're thinking these are obscure scholars, these are not obscure scholars. Okay. Here's my next photocopy. Oh, I got to start showing these. Here's the actual book. An ex-JW told me about this book as I was visiting a Southern Baptist church, and he says, "You've got to read this book by Charles Stanley." Anybody know who Charles Stanley is? Yeah, a minor figure, right? He's past president a number of times of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest Protestant denomination on the planet. Yeah, so Charles Stanley got videos, movies, TV shows, and radio. Okay, his book, here it is. This is the 1990 edition of the book. On page 107 at the bottom it says this: "Our final home." I'm just reading this. "Our final home" is the heading. Most Christians, that's when I want to cry because it's true, most Christians believe their ultimate destiny is heaven. That is not true. Man's ultimate destiny is planet Earth. Am I reading a Watchtower or what am I reading? It goes on the next page and he says, "But God placed man here on a specific purpose to rule over creation. The earth became man's responsibility to make his job easier. God designed a body for a man that is tailor-made for living and working on planet Earth. That's our final home." When I read that, I had to stare at it. Do you think Charles Stanley gets his theology from the Watchtower? Okay. Nonsense. Okay, several time president of the Southern Baptist Convention. And I'm looking at that, and I said, you know what this does, don't you? The Watchtower either doesn't know about it, which I don't believe, or they're keeping it a secret. And why are they keeping it a secret? Because now there's a place I can go. I don't have to keep my beliefs a secret. It may not be the majority view of the particular church I'm in. It's okay. Okay? Here's another fella. Does anybody know who Wayne Grudem is? Okay. How many have heard of the ESV Bible, English Standard Version? Oh, okay. He put it together. Yeah. Jody's got a copy of his very well used ESV Bible. Okay. Wayne Grudem is the guy that put it together and did the footnotes. And this is from his website, and there's a picture of him. I can't recognize him. And under the section of what is heaven, it's a physical place, and it includes the earth. Okay? So you see what I've just done is that if I meet a witness, I can bring up, even if you personally don't believe in this, that's okay. The thing is, you now know some scholars who do believe in it. You don't have to, you just need to know of some who do. Because now, I hope you would, if I were to ask you, if any of these guys, Wayne Grudem, Charles Stanley, Norman Geisler, he's passed away, were to show up at your church, could you welcome him in fellowship? Of course, thank you. Of course. Would you tell a witness just what you just said? That if Norman Geisler, Wayne Grudem, or Charles Stanley, and there's others, I'm going to mention some other names. David Jeremiah, okay, he holds to this. Okay, and Wayne Grudem says there's another fellow that has written a book on this, a little imaginative. Have you heard of Randy Alcorn and the book Heaven? You know what this book is about? It's about the paradise earth. A little imaginative, but this whole book, nearly 500 pages, is mostly about Jesus coming back and setting up a kingdom in a paradise earth and the resurrection and who's going to be here and blue sky, blue water, blue dolphins, and green grass. Look at the size of this. Okay? This is more than the Watchtower publishes in a long time. I wish someone had come and told me, said, you know what? I love this idea. Or I know of somebody that believes in the kingdom on earth. Really? Yes. And we have a group at our church, that the men's group, and we're studying this book. And it's 500 pages, and it's about the kingdom of God and the paradise earth. Somebody in a little room, in the printer in the garage, no. And then you find out how many, and then maybe you find it on a bookshelf at Walmart. So, who is preaching the good news of the kingdom? Okay, who is preaching, not the bad news of hell, but who is preaching the good news of the kingdom? I don't know how many thousands of copies. It's on Amazon.com. That's where I got this. And yes, I know it's titled Heaven, but it means that kingdom on earth is heaven, is what this means. Randy Alcorn, thank you very much. This is, I already mentioned this. This is a book by David Jeremiah. It's called Heaven. And it's got a page on Paradise Earth. Okay. So, I'm going to ask a question. You may not know the answer to this. This is a brain. If you're an ex-witness, you may recall. If you're a witness, you might recall. If you've never been a witness, you probably won't know the answer. What is the Watchtower picture for Mary, the mother of Jesus? Where's she going to live forever? In heaven, okay? What about Joseph, her husband? Where's he going to live? Earth, forever, okay? What about the kiddos? The adult children that believed in Jesus, where are they going to live? Heaven. If they had any little kiddos that died before they became adults to put faith and kept their integrity, blah, 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 where are the little kiddos going to be raised? Earth. This family will be eternally separated, okay? Now here's how you use this. You talk about JW and you bring out the kingdom and you go, oh, this is so cool. We have got a group at a church that is going to study the Paradise Earth, and it's going to be so wonderful, and it's going to be great blue sky, blue water, blue dolphins, and green grass. And you know, if I'm there, you know who I want to meet? I want to meet the most famous family of all. Mary, Joseph, and the kids. Wouldn't that be cool? Smile. Wouldn't that be cool? What's the JW who knows the doctrine going to say? Won't be there. They're not going to be there. There's a Watchtower that says that. It's the February 15th, 1998 Watchtower. It doesn't mention Mary and Joseph. Page 15, paragraph 12, about families being split apart. That the one who's the anointed has to bite the bullet and going to spend eternity away from their family and kids. Okay? This has suddenly become a sad doctrine. This was my number one favorite doctrine as a JW. It's now a sad doctrine because of that Watchtower said these families are going to be eternally split up. So here's a Christian saying, oh, it's going to be wonderful. These families will be united in Paradise Earth forever. And the JW is going, but they're not. What have you just done? The Watchtower hasn't told you about this. They've kept a secret. Why not? Because now there's a place where you can go. You don't have to keep your doctrines a secret, and the doctrines that you like, you can keep. And oh, by the way, we got a happier doctrine than you do, okay? No arguing, no verses. I didn't argue any verses, right? No arguing, questioning, oh, you know, in battle. What is the witness going to say? I don't know, okay? All right, so that's presentation. We actually have a deacon in our church that actually did that. Not the full-blown thing, but he went up to some witnesses doing cart witnessing, and he said, oh, we have a men's group, because we do. Men's group studying the kingdom on earth and Paradise Earth. Oh, that's so great, and families being united and forever. And the witnesses are just going, I thought we're the only ones that believe that. Big challenge. The Watchtower has misled us to think that we're the only ones who believe that. That's not cool. And he said, well, you want to come to one of our studies? You're invited. And they go, we can't. Oh, well, it's cool. And he said, but you can come to ours. Well, we got one when we're doing a good time. And it's not this book, but you know, you could say, we got a book that's 500 pages and we're going to just love doing it. Do you have anything like that? No. All right. Moving on to the next topic, issues with the Trinity. I mentioned it already that as I'm exiting the Watchtower, I held two things. Jesus is a distinct person and eternally subordinate to the Father. Who believes that? Who believes that? I've got a page out of the ESV Bible that Jody is holding, his own copy. That's his copy. This is I have a copy and a photocopy of this page. As a JW, what was our favorite verse to challenge Trinitarians? Absolute, I think the number one. There was one in John 14:28. There's another one even better, 1 Corinthians 15:28. That's the one I used as a JW. This is the footnote in Wayne Grudem, or the ESV Bible put together by Wayne Grudem. Footnote for 1 Corinthians 15:28. Jesus is one with God the Father and equal to the Father in deity, yet functionally subordinate to him. And this verse shows that his subjection to the Father will continue for all eternity. Now, you don't have to agree with this footnote in the ESV Bible. You don't have to agree with that at all. But would you agree that Wayne Grudem would be welcome in your fellowship? That Wayne Grudem has a place that he could go? Okay? You're not going to make that an essential for fellowship. I'm just asking, would you consider at least saying that to a witness? You will really help them. Because if some Christian had told me that, I could have left sooner. Because that was the verse that was keeping me and my friends inside the watchtower, because where else are we going to go where I believe 1 Corinthians 15:28 means that Jesus will be eternally functionally subordinate to the Father? Where am I going to find that? No place. Okay, I can't go. And if someone pulled this out and said, look at this ESV footnote, do you think that was printed in a garage printer? Okay, that's nonsense. This is real. Well, I have another quote. This is from another obscure scholar. I'm joking. His Systematic Theology, Volume 2. This is by Norman Geisler, 2003. One final word about the nature and duration of this functional subordination in the Godhead. It is not just temporal and economical. It is essential and eternal. For example, the Son is an eternal Son. He did not become God's Son. He always was related to God the Father as a Son and always will be. His submission to the Father was not just for time, but will be for all eternity. Now, I'm not asking you to agree with Norman Geisler on that. That is not what I'm doing. I'm not trying to prove that or anything like that. I'm asking, would you be willing to say that if Norman Geisler was looking for a place to go, that he would be welcome in your church? If so, can you tell a witness that? Because you see what you're doing as a witness saying, I have no place to go because I hold to Jesus, da-da-da. Okay. There is a place where you could go. Now, is there some essentials that the witness has to overcome? Sure. But this was what was holding me in the watchtower. Once I had this all sorted out, when they said, well, there's, the Trinity was these other things, that was a walk in the park. Okay? And it's funny, after I was baptized in the Southern Baptist Church, within a year, I was teaching Sunday school, and you know what that 13-week course was about? The Trinity. So 3 years earlier, I was here writing for the Society on refuting the Trinity, and now later I am teaching a course on the Trinity at a Southern Baptist church, attended by seminary students, by the way. Isn't that wild? Okay, next one, moving right along. As I said, hell, issues with hell. So I'm going to do some name dropping here. Okay, first of all, did you know that within the mainstream evangelical community, there are 3 views of hell? 3. Eternal conscious torment, eternal separation, not the torment, but eternal separation from God. And thirdly, it's a minority position. It's called conditional immortality or annihilationism. Things are not really annihilated, so I call it eternal smoke. Whatever. There's 3 views. Now, the one that the witnesses are upset with is the eternal conscious torment. That's the one they're upset with, not the other 2. Okay? So I'm going to mention some names. Has anybody heard of Lee Strobel? Okay. Case for Faith, Lee Strobel. Please read it. It's great stuff. Chapter 6, he quotes J.P. Moreland. J.P. Moreland, I've got the quote here so it's easy to pull it out. J.P. Moreland says, it's an interview, so it's an interview style, so they're going back and forth, talk. And J.P. Moreland comments, God doesn't torture people in hell, so he's flat wrong about that. He's commenting on someone else who is no longer a believer that was challenging Christianity, saying that hell is a torture chamber, and then J.P. Moreland, PhD, responds, God doesn't torture people in hell, so he's flat wrong about that. Lee Strobel says, J.P. Moreland mentions separation from God. Then Lee Strobel says, and that is hell? And J.P. Moreland's response is, yes, that's hell. It's not about torment, it's about a separation from God. People who leave the Watchtower don't know this. And when they do, they go, I got no problem with that. So, if J.P. Moreland is looking for a place for fellowship, if he was looking for a place, could he come to your church and be welcome? The answer is yes, just tell a witness that. There's one other. This is the minority view, but there's a fellow by the name of John Stott, S-T-O-T-T. And he gets in a conversation, and John Stott represents the conservative evangelical scholar in this book, Evangelical Essentials. Now, this is from 1988, some time ago. John Stott has passed away. But in here, on page 315, he draws a conclusion that the wicked may suffer for a time, but ultimately they cease to function and are no longer able to respond to hell. They're in hell, hell is eternal, but they're no longer responding to the torment. So I'm not asking you to believe either of these two, but if John Stott were alive and he showed up at your church looking for a place to fellowship, would he have a place to go? Okay. This next one, I'm moving on to the issue of politics. When I was first left the Watchtower and I was fellowshipping at this huge Southern Baptist church, which was in association with the Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, they knew I was wrestling over politics and getting involved in politics and government and such. And one of the elders there came up and handed me this article. This was from a 1995 magazine called Light, the January-February issue. And it's a debate between two minor scholars, that's a joke, between Richard Land and Norman Geisler, both of them founding Southern Evangelical Seminary. And I'm not asking you to agree with Norman Geisler on this end. Okay, you don't have to agree, but this is about violence against one's government. His point was it's never justified because you have to submit to Romans 13. And as a witness, I'm going, yeah, that's what I, as a recently exited witness, believes. And this is what he says. I'm just reading what it says here. While justification for violence against government can be found in the Declaration of Independence, it cannot be found in the Bible. And we must be reminded that it is only the latter, not the former, that is inspired. As Americans, we celebrate the baby of freedom that was born, not the rape violence by which it was conceived. I didn't write this, I'm just reading what he said. If America had been more patient, we could have gotten our freedom a little later without revolution, just as our sister colony to the north did, Canada. So we need not take things into our own hands. Governments are in good hands, the hands of God. As for evil governments, God gave them their authority, and he will judge them for misusing it. Vengeance is God's, not ours. He will repay. Signed, Norman Geisler, Dean of Southern Evangelical Seminary in Charlotte. That's the day Norman Geisler became my hero. Okay? Because here I was struggling with involvement in politics, and I said, this is more in line with what I, as a JW, would believe. And if you think about it, of these 4 doors or walls that keep Jehovah's Witnesses in, Norman Geisler knocks down 3 of them because he holds to a view that a witness would find acceptable on those 3 out of 4 issues. That made big points for me. So here's what I'm proposing, is that if you are involved in ministry, now if you're a witness and you're seeing this, wow, I had no idea that those doctrines, I could hold a form of them sort of, and on those points that I mentioned anyway, would be welcome in a fellowship somewhere. So what do? I have a call-in show every other Sunday. So this Sunday I'm traveling, so I won't be doing this Sunday, but the following 2 weeks later, I have a call-in show, Rick Farron's 6 Screens of the Watchtower, Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern, where it's a call-in show, any Bible question, especially for Jehovah's Witnesses. And I get calls like this, where can I go? And I got a call just a couple weeks ago, and they said, what do I do? I'm leaving the Watchtower, what do I do? And I said, here's your steps. First, know these things, that there's a place that you could go, okay? And there are people who are telling the good news of the kingdom. Why don't you know about it? One, because the Watchtower isn't going to tell you, and every witness goes like this, right? We don't go and ask, say, could you tell me about the good news? We didn't pay any attention to what other mainstream Christians, what mainstream Christians were teaching. So I said, then the next thing to do is call around, find a good Bible-believing church, and ask them if they hold to, on the essentials, unity, on the non-essentials, liberty, and love on all. And ask them, you don't have to say that you believe these Watchtower doctrines. Say that you have an affinity for what Norman Geisler says, or Wayne Grudem, or any of these other names I gave, J.P. Moreland, Lee Strobel. Rather than saying you're an ex-witness, say, I hold to these kind of views. What do you think? Would I be welcome there? What do you think of Romans 14? Now, if they say they don't know any of these scholars and they don't hold to a view of Romans 14, you may want to look elsewhere. Linda and I, as we were going through the same journey, we invited a pastor over to our house to discuss with Romans 14. Just telling you what he said. He says, you'll never find a church that holds to Romans 14. We said, thank you, you have a nice day. Okay? So, that's what I recommend to witnesses. If you are in ministry dealing with witnesses, or you have contact with them, you can see what you could do. If there's a chance to talk about the kingdom, you do the little scenario I did before. Oh, this is great, and I want to be there, and that sounds great, and some people I know are going to want to be there, believe they're going to be there. And how would they feel meeting the most famous family of the New Testament? Okay, you can do that. Or you can say on any of the other topics, whether it's on the Trinity, says, my church has been, or I've heard of scholars who teach that, well, all Trinitarians believe that Jesus is a distinct person. Witness, okay, that sounds odd. And some hold that Jesus will be eternally subordinate, like this ESV study Bible that I've got here. I was corresponding with an ex-JW on this very issue, and I told him about Wayne Grudem and Norman Geisler, and he says, obviously these two people that I've never heard of, Norman Geisler and Wayne Grudem, are heretics amongst mainstream Christians. And I couldn't talk him out of it. Why not? Because if he admitted that these guys were evangelicals, what would that do to his belief system that he's the only one that's got it right? Boom. And we eventually had to stop because he was just yelling at me in email, all caps, very derogatory, because he flatly he says, I don't believe it that these guys, I says, go to Amazon.com and you can find out. So you do those kind of routines. Did I mention any arguing with any verses? No. You can help a witness transition part way without firing a shot. Whether in hell or politics, whatever, you can say, well, there are so many Christians that believe in eternal separation. How about that? Or some don't get involved in politics. They're neutral. What have you told them? There is a place. So where can we go? We go to Jesus, but there is a fellowship that will welcome you. There is a fellowship that will welcome you, and they're everywhere. You just need to find them. Okay? Did we answer the question? Where else can you go? Yep. Okay. I think I may have 5 minutes. I may have a few minutes. I don't know if anybody has any questions, other issues. Whew. I will say this. If you're interested in some details on the Trinity, who do I recommend? Robert Bowman. And his current book is Putting Jesus in His Place. The second recommendation, you Google J. Hess Midwest Christian Outreach, And you'll find my article on the Trinity at Don Vino's website. And there's a lot of scriptures there. So if you're looking for something deep on the Trinity, if you've got any questions about Greek and Hebrew, I'll take those too. Yes, David? Yes, Robert Morey did that thick book. It's okay. I look for answering the tougher questions that witnesses want to know. That one is okay. I've got that book. It's so-so. I've not come across really good things that address the deity of Christ and something that would work with Jehovah's Witnesses other than what Robert Bowman has done. So, yes, Don.
You might mention, for those who just sort of know the name on Geisler, he's authored over 100 books on defense of the faith, founded 2 seminaries, trained the best living apologists today, Rodney Zacharias, William Lane Craig, etc.
Right. Yes, for the recording, yes, Norman Geisler, just look the man up. He's founded 2 seminaries, written 100 books, world-class apologist. He was the first person I saw when I tuned in on John Ankerberg when I was still a loyal witness. Just, whoa, I got to meet this guy. And eventually I did, and I even saw him last year when he was still alive. Yeah, so he runs that apologetic conference. And he has the International Society for Christian Apologists. I'm a member there. I know what I wanted to finish up. Where did I end up? Sorry, that's a footnote to the rest of this. Where did I end up? Got out of the Watchtower, got baptized at the Southern Baptist Church, continued learning all these things, diving in. I became a member of the Evangelical Theological Society. Normally, you have to be a PhD. I don't, so I'm an associate member. But through that, I found out, I'm just saying, that although normally in most evangelical churches, the view that Jesus is eternally subordinate, it's not the popular view right now in the churches. However, it is the majority view among seminary professors, translators, and scholars. Just saying. Not that you have to sign up for anything. Just saying. So a member of ETS, I became an elder in a church. I have my own discipling ministry, and now I'm the pastor of a small evangelical church in Garner, North Carolina. We've got an apologetics class, and we've got a class where we're about 6 students. We're learning biblical Greek, basic biblical Greek. So this is where you can find a place. We're a Romans 14 church, by the way. Any questions in the few minutes? Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Don, for that point of just who Norman Geisler is, because, like I said, he's my hero. All right. Very good. Thank you very much.